Jad Jebara, President and CEO of Hyperview, discusses the hybrid infrastructure landscape in which all companies are working out how best to optimize the performance of their applications and, importantly, the infrastructure on which they run. He explains how Hyperview has reinvented DCIM to provide a new level of insights and actions to those responsible for operating and managing data center and wider IT enterprise infrastructure assets, whatever the mix of on-prem, colo, cloud, and edge.
Okay, so perhaps we can start with the fact that everyone rushed to the cloud, public cloud, private cloud, whatever, and from that, we've now evolved to maybe a slightly more sophisticated landscape where everyone's arrived at some version, their own version, if you like, of a hybrid cloud approach. Is that a fair assessment of where we are at the moment?
There is. If you look at the evolution of the industry, if you look at early 2000, the majority of the workloads were in data centers and on-prem data centers and on-premise, and everybody built their data centers and so on and so forth. As you look at workloads right now, about 30% is in the cloud, 50% in what we call edge locations, and the rest is on-prem locations. And what has driven that is the type of workloads that are needing we run and the type of requirements around them. If it's around security, latency, scalability, proximity to the data where it is, cost, and so on and so forth. So just to say one size fits all does not work. The cloud has a very pivotal role to play in our infrastructure and how we operate, but as well as requirements for workloads and how we deploy workloads is very pertinent and very, very important nowadays.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a few of the reasons, but would it be fair to say that the cost? I think everyone rushed into the cloud, thought it was going to be, if not bargain basement, much less expensive, and then they suddenly discovered if you actually want to make it enterprise fit, you're probably not saving any money. And then you have this great sort of compliance and regulation piece where I think you suggested people want to know where their data is. So those are the two main drivers, or are there other things going on?
Yes, and if you look at if you want to dissect this a little bit, if you look at the cost element, Phil, so there are two ways to go to the cloud, right? There's what we call lift and shift, where you take, I have my existing infrastructure, I have my workloads, and I'm going to say this virtual machine or this physical machine, I'm going to go and put it on this virtual machine. This is the majority of the people that move to the cloud realized it's very costly, and that what will cause some of them to go back and saying, well, no, it's cheaper to on-prem. The second way, which is the right way to go to the cloud, to say, how can I leverage the cloud technologies and basically re-architect my solutions to use that? So an example would be, traditionally, you have a database server. Now, can I use database services? Which one should I use? How do I scale it? What kind of costs are involved in ingestion of data or extracting data, and so on and so forth? Understanding the costs of every element that you bring in and the capabilities of those services enables you to architect solutions in a better way. And the most successful people moving to the cloud were very intentional about moving to the cloud, whereby they designated their types of workloads and said, anything production grade, I want it to be in the cloud, but utilizing cloud services, because I can scale and lower utilization of various services as required. And then R&D and all that can be in co-location in a more controlled, contained environment, but also keeps my team with the right edge and the right experience for managing infrastructure. Because just saying I'm going to go to the cloud does not mean that you outsourced everything. You still have to build the competencies to understand how to manage that from a functional perspective, from a technical perspective, and cost perspective, because the hyperscalers are evolving so fast and innovating so fast. You need to keep up with that as well. Just by surrendering the rein does not make sense. So you're shifting costs, you're not saving costs, but you're running more effectively, efficiently, and so on and so forth, if you're very intentional about that. And then to your point, sorry, the security and compliance requirements becomes also an umbrella around the privacy, security, and all that is another dimension where you'll start looking at the cloud from that perspective.
And in terms of where people are on the journeys, I mean, is it still fairly early days for people getting to what I'd call a mature hybrid model? Or do you think most people have understood that they, to your point, they need to understand which applications belong, where, for whether it's performance, cost, compliance, all these things, or are people still working their way through that process?
Working through the way through that. We're still in the early innings. And the reason is, hybrid, I remember when we managed 22 data centers in between 2007 to 2012, everybody was talking about the cloud, and cloud meant different things for different people, right? When you talk about hybrid, some people define hybrid is like, I have physical and I have virtual. Some say I have physical, virtual, on-prem, and co-location and cloud, right? And edge, and so on and so forth. Some say, no, actually my old infrastructure running on my mainframes can talk via APIs to cloud services. So it depends on who you talk to. So really depends on the maturity of the infrastructure that you have, and understanding the classification and categorization of your workloads and how they should run. And then going down the journey saying, this is where I'm going to place my workloads. We're still in the early inning. The cloud has a cloud and edge have a major growth cycle ahead of it still. And it makes sense from that perspective. And people are still absorbing the requirements and understanding it. And every 3 years, as you think about hardware refresh cycle, these questions become more important for enterprise and customers to think about. What should I consider in terms of running my infrastructure?
Okay, and then the reason we're having the chat today, I suppose, in the main is where does Hyperview? What's your role within this, constantly shifting, evolving landscape?
Well, our role is very simple. We provide insight. So to talk about what we provide, let me share with you my journey, or our journey. In between 2007 to 2012, we managed 22 data centers, global infrastructure. We grew a company from 35 million to 635 million. And one of the challenges that we faced as executives is like, how do we make decisions? How do we share insight within the organization? And I wore multiple hats. And we looked at that time, what tools were available there. And we looked at implementing something called data center infrastructure management, DCIM. And what we realized at that time, it was extremely expensive and limited in scope to what the hardware vendor was selling, power and environmental. We wanted the full visibility across all layers. The operational layers, you're talking about your facilities, your PDUs, power distribution units, UPSs, uninterruptible power supplies, and generators, so on and so forth, going up the IT stack, the virtual stack, and the IoT stack. And we couldn't find anything there. So what Hyperview does, we have one simple rule. We provide insight, and insight can be consumed in multiple aspects and multiple groups within the organization. Descriptive, I know what I have, and I know the state of it. I know every asset that I have in my infrastructure, virtual and physical, I know the state of it. Diagnostic, if something happened, what happened with this? Then predictive, how can I detect something from happening by utilizing analyzers and digital twin and so on and so forth. A lot of marketing, beautiful words here. And then after that, prescriptive, we provide operators, you should do this because 1, 2, 3, 4. And lastly, cognitive, which is we started our journey on that, feeding it with all the data and analytics that we have. So that enables stakeholders and multiple layers in the organization to make decisions. If I'm an executive in an organization, I can look at my KPIs and say, yeah, I'm running efficiently. I know where I'm heading. And if I'm somebody who manages the servers or infrastructure, I know the state of each one of them. I know the fans on this server is this. I know the PDU is over or underutilized, and so on and so forth. So we provide insight. That's what we do across all layers within the organization. And that enables the automation orchestration as well.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned the phrase, or the acronym DCIM, and I know, as to your point, it's been around for quite a while. And as you explained when you first looked at it, there wasn't anything what you would say, I wouldn't say not fit for purpose, but there were some, shall we say, gaps in the offerings. So I think a few people maybe had their fingers burnt, because DCIM, when it was first arrived, it was going to solve all your problems in the data center, etc., and it didn't. So I suppose, to those people, what would you say in terms of why should they give it another chance, or what's different between version 1 and version 2, or even version 3 where we're at now? Just from where we were to where we've got to, perhaps.
Yeah, I would say more than fingers burned. You look at when we wanted to implement DCIM, we're looking at a multi-million-dollar investment just from a licensing perspective, and then implementation cycle of 18 months, and then IT workloads and all that we needed to manage. So that even adds more to the cost. And I couldn't justify it to the board of directors at that time. So a lot of companies have invested millions and haven't seen the payback, and that is a problem. So how things have changed. Similar to what happened in other verticals. You think about your CRM, 20 years ago when I was in the Bay Area, people, Siebel and Oracle was, you pay them millions and you implement them on-prem and you run your system. Then comes Salesforce, $120 a salesperson, and you have all this capability and you keep scaling and you have a platform to run. ERP systems, the same way. You had all the multi-million-dollar investments. Now you can start with 2 people, $200, and then you can keep adding functionality as you need it in a streamlined manner, and innovation has driven. So has DCIM. There are few players that have adopted that. We are one of the key players in this area where we adopted cloud native technologies and the cloud architecture. That means that our customers can start immediately, right? Again, deployment cycle shrunk from years to days, if not hours. Time to value is extremely important for us. And then the scope and from a functional perspective, what the layers you can see, it's no longer limited to the environmental elements and the power elements, but it has gone and matured in stack to go up the IT level and the IoT level to provide you that visibility. Right. So things have evolved and to the right way. And we're seeing that day in, day out with our customers where they start implementing DCIM in a almost a risk-free environment. And they like what they see and they keep growing at their own pace and in an effective manner.
And in terms of where it's best used, because I mean, again, it started, I think, purely to be used within a physical data center location to tell you what was going on in your data center. But to the point at the start of our conversation, we're talking about a hybrid world where you've got on-prem, colo, cloud, etc. So how much visibility or how much functionality, if you like, does DCIM give you once you go away from your on-prem data center, should you have one, into the cloud, which is, I would say, notoriously, but trying to find out what's going on in the cloud is maybe not as easy as knowing what's going on in your own computer room, if you like.
So you have the cloud and you have the edge. So you think about the requirements. If you take a step back and see what people are struggling with, what teams are struggling with. Number one, you have compliance and regulations. More and more regulations around security. You think about after COVID, a lot of industries and a lot of companies were designated as critical. So you have to account for every asset and the state of every asset. But then you see recently, we're talking about carbon impact, right? And people, starting to wrap their heads around it. What does that mean? And so the reporting around, in the EU, you have several things that came into effect that require collecting carbon impact reporting and environmental and all that for data centers starting January 1st, 2024 and reporting to January 1st, 2025. You need to provide evidence for that. The second aspect, and in California, the same manner, you're looking at it. So what does that mean? That means that you're looking at it from scope 2. How am I using the infrastructure? Am I using it effectively? How is my power utilization effectiveness? How is my water utilization effectiveness? What is my CUE, carbon utilization effectiveness, and so on and so forth, and other KPIs. But also scope 3, the supply chain. What am I sourcing? So where am I located? How am I using it? And what am I sourcing gives me the impact. And till to this day, people have been oblivious to that and saying, well, I can look at it on a data center macro level. The DCIM has been evolving, and this has been our mission for the past, since we started the company, Make Critical Infrastructure Think. DCIM has evolved to give you that evidence, to give you that trackability, give you that information around the compliance and environmental. And we honestly look at it that, the majority of environmental targets optimistically are aspirational in nature and realistically are BS. And my fear is by 2030, When we get closer to that, it's like, oh, we can't reach our zero targets and zero emission targets. We're going to buy offsets. We're going to go plant some trees. Versus our thesis here is, and our mission is, you have 2 hardware refresh cycles from now till 2030. Let's empower you with the right information today at the various level of the organization. I want Joe, who manages the servers, to know that server's impact is X. And this is how I can reduce it, right? And so on and so forth. So that's the first challenge, compliance and regulations. The second challenge is around our teams are overworked and we have a talent shortage. And it's hard to recruit into the environment. And then with Edge, 50% of the infrastructure is all over the place. Are you flying people around? So DCIM has evolved more as well, more than the monitoring side, but also a control side. The ability to do upgrades, the ability to do configuration management. And you think about it, if you have a smart workload, think about smart infrastructure, smart workloads, managing traffic lights and all that. If one component is broken, it's the weakest link. It affects everybody else. So how do you manage all that? So DCIM has evolved to be that as well. And third, cybersecurity. That's a big challenge. How do you protect what you don't have? Security through obscurity doesn't work. So new DCIMs with digital discovery beyond SNMP, meaning understanding so many protocols that you can profile assets, understand what they are, and understand what changed in an authorized or unauthorized manner is very important. So the idea of taking account of every asset and knowing the state of it, both from a security perspective and operational, because an asset can go down and the infrastructure is down, you're securing an infrastructure that is not operational. And I covered the edge, which as part of the talent shortage, but really that the evolution of edge and all the workloads that we're deploying everywhere, that needs to be managed. And you can't really expect people to fly all over the world just to manage and upgrade firmware and configuration, all that. So DCIM has evolved, and customers are looking for that platform that can support, is vendor agnostic, can support infrastructure and support multiple layers.
And in terms, I think in one of your early answers, you hinted at it, but in terms of how, I'll say proactive is perhaps the wrong word, but it's recording a lot of information, it's giving you a lot of information. Is it now also able to recommend actions, and will it even eventually take actions on your behalf, depending on the policies that have been written around it? Yep. So how intelligent can DCIM become, or is it merely, here are all the facts, Mr. Data Center Operator, you make the decisions, or will it start making decisions on your behalf, I guess, and helping to run the data center more?
I try to avoid talking about AI because everybody is an AI company, right? and sorry for the theatrics with the hands, but you talk to anybody who's like, oh, we're an AI company. What does it mean? So think about the journey for insight, right? Descriptive. I know what I have. I know the state of it. I'll give you specific examples. My workloads went down. Well, I have a UPS. Why didn't it work? Diagnostic. It didn't work because the health of that UPS, the battery health was not good. It was not charged. How can I detect that? That's preventive, the third base. Well, if you monitor the sensors on that unit, you're able to set up thresholds and notify your vendor or your maintenance or your team to go change it. Prescriptive, the fourth level. Well, I want, when this happens, for the system to do this, to send a PO or notifications and actually shift workloads, right? So, and then cognitive is the nirvana. So what does cognitive mean? If you look at AI and the automation, think about it in two distinct manners. Think about machine learning, which is mostly statistical analysis, which in our opinion manages or can solve 90% of the issues. And then you have the neural network transformer and generative aspect, right? One feeds into two, right? One feeds into two. So you need that, what we call the monitoring pipeline. You need the ability to ingest sensor data from your infrastructure continuously to feed your analytics and statistical models that can give you decisions and tell you, hey, Phil, something is happening, do this. Hey, you have a firmware upgrade, do this. You have the fans are heating up. because the airflow is not correct because you have so many gaps within your rack. That is all statistical analysis. That's machine learning, AI. Transformer and neural networks and generative requires multiple aspects. Number one, it requires you to say, well, I need to take a big model, take a subset of that and train it. And then take a subset of that and train it for a specific use case that I'm handling in a private manner, in a secure private manner, because a lot of this data cannot leave, and you cannot go paste it into Chat GPT with your internal IPs. So you need, and it needs to understand the context. So once you have a model trained, you need to empower the model. You empower the model in two ways: passive, meaning generate reports; active, meaning you can connect it to your control pipeline, your control ability to do firmware upgrade, configuration management, and so on and so forth, or recommendation to do it. So for example, imagine yourself saying, hey, Hyperview, give me the status of everything that needs to be updated. Fantastic. Based on the context of tier 0 or tier 1 from a classification and operational or to be provisioned, create the scripts. Now, that means that that neural network, that large language model understands every context about your infrastructure and understand how you can talk and do that, and then you can approve it. That's stage 2, where you can empower the model. Stage 3, which you were referring to, is where you go cruise control, where you can say, I want the model to understand that if this happens, do that, or maintain similar to the Nest dial in homes, the smart thermostats. I want these variables to be at this level by moving 1, 2, 3, 4. So you think about the AI journey, and just simplistically, get the data, make sure that you have a continuous stream of the data, and the more data, the more sensor data that you have, the better. Analyze the data, feed it into statistical models, get 90% of the impact that you need from there. And then identify the use cases that you need to train large language models and have the automation around that. And fine, that goes to that. So, and that's how we look at AI and cognitive and automation. And yeah, so hopefully that answered the question that, that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And in terms of perhaps bringing it back to the start of the conversation with people developing their hybrid cloud, or just more broader hybrid IT strategy, on-prem, and all the different varieties we discussed, is it, I suppose it's possible for them to do it without a DCIM, but with a DCIM they get so many more benefit, or they know that they're making a lot of the right decisions. Just I suppose, if you can explain the relevance of DCIM to this hybrid world, if that's possible.
Yeah, sure. Look at it as if it's your GPS system. I remember in early or 1999, when I wanted to drive from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, I printed maps and started going, oh, we missed an intersection. Oh, we did this or that, right? Versus today, you talk to your car, or you talk to your Siri or Android, and it tells you along the way, hey, you need to reroute because 1, 2, 3, 4. New DCIMs are equivalent to that, right? So you can choose how you want to take your journey. And actually, I had a talk in DCW. People were asking about AI and all that. I said, the AI journey, is it relevant for you and all that? It depends on what vehicle or mode of transportation you want to select. And I'll be very brief about this, but I give an example between Los Angeles and San Diego. I said you have 4 means of transportation. Number 1, a buggy and a horse, which is in heyday, pun intended, was in early 1900s, where a very good mode of transportation. It was fast until the motor vehicle was developed, right? This is environmentally safe. It's effective, it takes you there, but it's not efficient. It will take you weeks to get there, but you'll enjoy the scenery. That's the king of Excel. That's, you're running using Excel or doing things manually. Your team is overworked. You have security through obscurity. You don't know the state of things. You're reactive, and you're going to be caught unprepared for all the requirements that are coming down your way. Now, the second one is you're taking a traditional car. Yeah, it is. It is fast and it's more convenient and it has so many components and computers and all that. But the onus, you own that problem. The onus is on you to link all that data, analyze it, understand it. And if you have an error, you have to go to the dealership and pay hundreds of dollars for somebody to talk to you and say, that's error code E25341. What does that mean? It's very serious, and you pay for it, right? Then the next one is Tesla. It's a different quality of life. Upgrades are on, coming to you over the air, and it's a different experience. So the traditional motor vehicle is your traditional DCIM. You own the problems, you already spent the capital on it, and you're stuck with that. A Tesla is your next gen DCIM, where you're focused on different things, and a lot of issues that you were facing before have already been solved. It's smarter and takes you there. And the last one is Hyperloop, takes you there in 37 minutes between the two countries, between the two cities. So that's cognitive or AI enabled DCIMs. So Tesla leads you to that. So if you're saying, well, if somebody has invested in an old DCIM and or is running on Excel or Open DCIM, or yeah, if you look at the quadrants that we covered, if it's compliance, you're going to have a very serious shortfall there because you don't have the evidence collection. If you're looking at it from a shortage and skill and an ability to automate, your automation is through your people. Your people have to do the hard work. And if it's cybersecurity, it's security through obscurity for those teams because they're reactive. And supporting edge and IoT, they probably just keep track of like, I have this workload there, but they don't know the state of it and they don't know how to manage it. So retooling is required, and it will save companies a lot of hassles and a lot of save them from a lot of pitfalls.
And maybe just finally, in terms of implementing a modern DCIM solution, Hyperview in particular, is it a bit brick by brick? Do you go all for straight out for everything? I guess, is there an optimum way of implementing the solution, I suppose, is what I'm asking, in terms of what you do when, or does it again vary very much on your own environment?
So traditional DCIMs will take you months, if not years, to implement, and I hear a lot of horror stories about that. For our platform, we learned from other verticals. When you go implement a CRM, you're up and running, and time to value is almost instantaneous. The average implementation for us is sub 30 days and usually less than 10 days. And we're making investments this month and next month to make sure that the actual implementation, you don't talk to anybody. We have several examples where we have a global player, for example, tried to implement one of our competitors' product, and they actually rave about it on G2 and on Reddit. Their cost for the software was approximately $1.5 million, and implementation was $1.2 million. 6 months into the project, they couldn't implement 3 data centers because there were big data centers and keep requirements changing for IT and all that, and you need different database licensing model. You need enterprise and so on and so forth. They called us midweek and they said, well, we're facing a lot of challenges. How long would it want to run a POC? So we said, fine, here's your infrastructure within seconds. We implemented the first data center in 1 day. They implemented the second and third data center in the second day. We finished the implementation in 30 days, global. So they saved $1.2 million of professional services and millions in licensing costs. We have another example today. We have a customer that's requiring to monitor about 1 million sensors per minute for 3 years. Think about the trillion amount. Like traditional DCIMs, from an architecture perspective, the database cannot support it. For us, this is a configuration parameter for the cloud service, and we enable that. They asked us how long would the implementation be? 2 weeks. Because all the steps that require professional services, we've made a concerted effort to say they're not required. You empower the user to use the platform. And this is literally taking a page out of the playbook of every successful SaaS company. Customers, Michael Dell, when he started Dell, he said his secret for success is he asked himself one question: what is the customer of my customer desire? What does my customer of the customer require? Right? So we looked at this, said we're not selling to a reseller network that wants to do 10x and that one and then sell to the customer. We want the customer to be able to instantaneously discover the assets in so many protocols. They have the choice to discover whatever asset. We build a digital twin and they're up and running. They can start as small as $100 or 100 pounds or 100 euros, depending on where the jurisdiction is. And they can keep ad services and functionality as required. And that proved to be very, very desired and very successful for us. And we're going to a point where we're actually lowering the threshold. We're going to do 30-day proof of concept to start with. And that's probably towards the end of this year, we're going to kick that off. So there's no risk. Customers they're used to, like if you go to Azure or AWS, are you talking to anybody? No, you just deploy the workload, you test it, and say, well, this is good. I need this feature. I need this feature. You pull it from the catalog and you're good. And that's our approach to the market. And that's how we wanted to consume the product as a customer. So we looked at this and said, well, this is where the puck is going. Canadian reference to hockey, of course, I have to insert. And that's how we operate. So that's how we're changing the dynamics and reinventing DCIM, both from a monetization model, from a deployment model, and from a technical perspective as well.
Okay. We've covered a lot of ground. I can't think of another sporting analogy to end the conversation, but no, Jad, seriously, I've really enjoyed chatting to you and you've given us some great insights. So I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it, Phil, as well. Pleasure always, and looking forward to future collaborations as well. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks again. Thank you.
Bye-bye.